Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Welcome to our house. Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery is incredibly proud to be hosting Night in the Museum, curated by Ryan Gander. Tonight we have Ryan Gander in conversation with Jonathan P. Watts, art critic and Ryan's editor. We hope you have an incredibly enjoyable time. Ryan and Jonathan are going to be discussing the work here for about an hour's time. Then we'll have half an hour for questions at the end, if that's all right. Enjoy your stay, and if there's anything we can do to make it comfortable for you, let us know. So, round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. Ryan Gander and Jonathan.
I think we might actually talk for a bit less than an hour. We might go for about sort of 40 minutes and then we'll open up the floor to questions. I just want to start by giving my congratulations and also my birthday wishes. My congratulations to Ryan for curating this complex, visually stimulating, perhaps even iconoclastic exhibition, and also my birthday wishes to the Arts Council, which is 70 years old, and of course the 70th birthday is the occasion for inviting Ryan Gander to curate this exhibition. It's also been an occasion to commission a series of new works, and if you've had a chance to look around the exhibition, you'll see that there is a newly commissioned work by Ryan, which is called As Old as Time Itself, Slept Alone, which is over as we're sitting in the back left corner of the gallery. And then, of course, there's the exhibition that Ryan has curated. It seems to me that the work and show have a kind of that specific work and the exhibition that you've curated have quite a complicated genesis that relates to your own artistic biography, to the own things that you feel have been valuable in your training as an artist, and also that you feel are valuable to you now. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that. So, to ask a precise question. Did the work, the newly commissioned work, happen before you thought about the exhibition, or did they happen at the same time?
I thought it was I thought it was at 5 o'clock, and I was really geared up about an hour ago, and now I'm really tired. And I gave a guy 20 quid in an Uber to drive fast because we were late. Anyway, he had to get chocolate as well because he got tired.
I always nibble on a bit of chocolate before a talk to get my sugar levels up, and I had that at 5:45. So.
I didn't have any chocolate. I don't like talking about accessibility. Oh God, no, I shouldn't say that. Accessibility is very overrated and very underrated at the same time. Does that make any sense? It's underrated because I think 99% of British people are quite scared of going to museums because they feel a bit alienated.
Right.
Because it's kind of an elitist thing, the pursuit of art. So one objective was to try and deal with that. And then accessibility is overrated because my job's using my imagination. Mm. So if there's, I don't mean accessibility like I haven't got 10 quid to go into that nightclub kind of thing. Physical accessibility. I mean accessibility as in if you can't be somewhere, you can imagine it. So you often find that people, so maybe people in prison or in hospital or in restricted situations, use their imagination more. You can travel in your imagination. Mm. And obviously my trade, the thing that I'm paid for, my job, is using my imagination. Mm. And both of those things play into this exhibition. This idea of what accessibility is.
Mm. I mentioned biography because in the introductory text, in the publication that's available for sale around the corner,
how much is it?
You talk about this ballerina case that you had as a child, which was born out of a kind of restrictive situation. I wonder if you can tell us a bit more about this ballerina case, because it becomes this kind of metaphor or a kind of motif for your practice now, and also as a kind of methodology for assembling objects, for arranging objects, for curating objects.
Yeah, that's a massive question. I could do about 20 answers.
Okay.
I had a ballet case, but I didn't have any shoes in it. I had like bits of string and leather and stuff. I used to make bangles and bookmarks. But the ballet case is quite interesting because, you know, if you want to write a novel, a lot of things that people find that they need is like a really nice old desk, wooden desk, and a Chesterfield.
Room of a view.
A view out the window, little blanket, kettle, no job helps. You got some time. But obviously you don't need any of them things at all. The last 2 books I wrote with you that you edited, I wrote them on a dictaphone commuting. So you don't. And that's kind of interesting. Yeah, but the ballet case is like a physical manifestation of, I guess, impetus to create things, the stuff you need, or the stuff you don't need, starting points. Does that answer it? Probably not.
Well, yeah, it does to some extent, yeah. But there's also the figure of the ballerina. So in the work that's been newly commissioned, it's made up of 3 things that we can see. There's a blue cube, there's a white, well, it's cuboid.
So and
then there's the cast bronze ballerina, which is based on Degas' ballerina. And the ballerina has featured in earlier works of yours.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of, well, there's not a lot of them, not like hundreds, but there's a few.
Right, but also you've talked before about the idea of, I mean, the show that you've curated is called The Museum at Night, and it's this sort of imaginary scenario in which sculptures might come to life and explore the museum collections.
Yeah, about 8 years ago I was in Pittsburgh at the Carnegie, doing the Carnegie International, and when I was installing I had to go through a load of rooms every morning while the cleaners were out. The museum was obviously shut. And I kept going past this Degas, and I obviously knew who he was and everything, but I'd never really looked at them. And I kept going past it, and I kept thinking, just kept thinking about what she would see, which is kind of a weird thing to, not really, inquisitive mind, I don't know. Think about objects, seeing things, and objects coming to life. And we did a project recently, which was a chair of Picasso, which is in a collection in Canada, where JP became Picasso's chair and tweeted as this inanimate object, which is a similar kind of idea, making things speak. So I kept thinking about this Degas, and I felt really sorry for her, because obviously she's a dancer, but she's incredibly heavy, and she's stuck to this plinth. And it's a bit like weird the way everyone looks at her. And then I thought, well, that's fair enough, because she returns the gaze. And then I thought, but nobody else thinks that. When they look at her, they don't think she's looking at me. That's just not in the equation in your head. And then I was making a film at Tate Britain, and there was another one. I was like, that's exactly the same. Realised there was like 38 casts, and they're all exactly the same. And there was like, there's 38 of her. So if you imagine, if she's one entity, and there's 38 like iterations of her, all the things she's seen and all the comments she's heard, that's quite a nice thing. And then I just wanted to bring her to life. So I started, the first one I did, she was having a cigarette, just sat by a plinth. So those works, it's a bit like a cartoon narrative. So she does different things, and everything that she does interferes with the institution of art. So there's one where she looks out the window. She's right at the front of the gallery, before the desk, not in the art space, but in the public space with the leaflets and stuff. There's another where this one she's asleep. There's another where she's crawling out of her plinth. But everything that she does, she sort of, tries to unravel this mad institution, this alienating, elitist institution she's in. And she always has had a plinth, and the plinth changes size every time I make one. So it's a bit like Alice in Wonderland. You don't know if she's growing or the plinth's shrinking. And each one has a blue cube. And the blue cube, I wanted to make just the relationship more complicated. You have the plinth, which is like the institution of art maybe, the exhibition device, and then you have her, which is the art and the spectator, because she's looking back at you, because she's brought to life. And then she's like old art, right? And I thought she needed to like interact with new art.
Yeah.
And I've always thought that if Roadrunner went into a contemporary art gallery in a cartoon, the art would definitely be a blue cube. It just seemed like really obvious to me. It's like a motif of a pastiche of conceptual modern art, or like this geometric Yves Klein blue kind of. So that's always in the
Yves Klein blue.
Yeah, that's always in the equation as well, and that changes size. Yeah, and then, so that's where, I mean, this is where it came. This is a new work that was made for here, but the meeting Degas in the Carnegie in Pittsburgh was, I guess, the start of this idea that most art when you go into a museum is dead until it's activated. It doesn't do anything.
Who does the activating?
The other art.
Okay.
Oh, the curator. Sorry.
Well, no. I mean, sorry. There's not like a right question about it. But I'm just
has to
thinking
put it
about
there.
no, but also, I mean, I'm thinking about the spectator as well. Like that. But what's interesting here is that you're actually saying that other artworks animate other artworks, spectators animate artworks, artworks animate spectators. So in other words, there's this complex.
They all have this aura around them. Artworks, I think. They have this like zone around them. And when you know when you're close enough, because you're in this zone. And depending on what I don't like the word juxtaposed, but that word. Depending on what they're put next to, the field that's around them changes shape and changes velocity.
So the works here and in the previous iteration of the show at the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, they're selected from the collection of the Arts Council.
Yeah.
There are a few works that come from private collections, and then also works that come from host venues. What was the experience like for you being kind of given free rein on the Arts Council's collection? I mean, how big is this collection? Can you describe like something like the size of it, how you get access to it?
It's like when your kids are old enough to understand what Christmas is, and then they come downstairs and they freak out, and then they start crying. When they start crying, you're like, oh no, it wasn't meant to be like this. It was meant to be a nice, happy thing. And now she's overexcited, and it's all ruined. It was a bit like that.
Okay.
So I was just in these big storage rooms full of art, crying, throwing a tantrum on the floor, beating. No, I mean, it's amazing. It's like a massive sweet shop. Yeah. I mean, I have to say, the things that I do for different reasons, but this is such a treat to do this, you know, for an artist, and an artist who's interested in the things that I'm in, and as the practice that I have, it's like 10 Christmases. Yeah, it's just amazing to the technicians are amazing. Alongside, like, go up and ask to see something, they bring it out for you. Yeah, can you imagine? Amazing. Just so nice.
So how do you even begin to make sense of that material? How do you even begin to make selections?
Well, it's impossible because there's 8,000 works.
Right. I mean, it's possible in the sense that there's a show that
there's a certain amount of time that I could spend doing it.
Yeah.
Because I have to pay other people because we're doing lots of projects. So there's always the economy of how much time and money you can spend on something. So I knew how much time I had, and it would have taken me a year to go through all the works. Yeah. So in a really kind of logical, strategic, sounds a little crass, but this is like creative problem solving. This is creativity as well. Is you just like identify your objectives and your aims and your constraints, and you narrow the problem down by being creative, and you set yourself a situation where there's rules in play. Right. Compromise is a good thing, I always think. So narrow the problem down. not that it's a problem's negative, but problem's good if you have a creative mind. You really enjoy problems. So, I mean, the problem was a nice thing for me because it was something to do with my head.
So what kind of rules did you put in play?
Bring me all the blue works.
Sure.
When I said to him earlier that when we were at college, there was a curating course in Manchester, and we used to sit in the cafe in Manchester Metropolitan University. It's called Top of the Pops Cafe, where we go for breakfast. And we used to ridicule the curating students, and we'd do that by coming up with really great ideas that we thought were good for curating shows. So it was like, we're only going to do shows with our works our mum and dads have made, or we're only going to do shows that are yellow works, and just to chastise them. And I've actually ended up doing exactly what which is a weird. And someone said today, has anyone done this before? It's such a simple idea. And I was like, probably not, because it's such a simple idea that no one would bother, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everyone just dismissed, I don't know. They probably have, everything's been done.
So, so you selected blue work. I'm just trying to sort
blue
of
works
develop
was
a
one
sense
rule.
of how you
Second
made your
rule
selection.
was I wanted to make pairs of works.
Right.
I've been making a lot of work that's like based on spot the difference. It's a bit more complicated than that, but seeing two things that I'm not drawing cartoons with different, the sun's not there and that sort of stuff, but just having a doubling of things. It's like human inquisition to compare things, isn't it?
Right.
So pairs, and then the pair thing was what relationship would they have, and then the obvious thing was with what I mentioned at the beginning with accessibility, was to kind of make a diversion for the visitor from their own problem of being a human mind in the institution of art and feeling not able to make decisions about whether that was good or not, and feeling like they were being watched and feeling like they were being judged, and feeling because they had no art historical background or no visual training that they were ill-equipped to make any sort of decision about the artwork, which is absolute rubbish because every human is creative. Whatever you do, all the clothes you're wearing was a choice, so everyone in here's made choices today, which is creativity.
So if you are trying to address the ways in which we behave in galleries, the kind of self-conscious behaviour that we often feel, how have you achieved this, do you feel, in the exhibition? I mean, how did you set about doing that?
I didn't know if it would work, but I think it's
worked.
I'm not bothered about saying it's good, because you just,
But you can't say that, can you?
I can. I think it's really good. No, I do think it's good. Well, that sounds bad. I do think it's good though.
Yeah.
I think it worked because I've watched people, the way people move, and they come in and people. You know when you're in a gallery and you're watching people and they're watching other people to see what those people think about the art before they make a decision about the art themselves, because they're not sure that they're making the right decision about what they think the art is. It's easy because you just use the sculptures to diffuse and divert all that. See what I mean? So people come in and they look at the sculptures that are the figure, and then usually if one of these figurative sculptures was on their own, they'd just be looking into space. But then what's it looking at? And then you look at,
Yeah.
So it takes that bashfulness out of this awkward situation.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's like because you immediately go in and it's a distraction, and you're looking at something and you're trying to see what this thing is looking at. It displaces that. I'm sorry, I'm just repeating what you said, but it displaces that self-consciousness that comes from observing other people. So your attention is kind of put onto the kind of the sculptures that are doing the looking.
But there's this. We were talking before, and I said to you about my eldest daughter came home from school, and she got a thing that goes on the fridge about what they're good at, the certificate, and she got a certificate for empathy, and like other kids got good handwriting and stuff, and I was like, that's pretty sound. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
But how do you think
of all the certificates, that's like the one to get, I reckon. And I think here you get this empathy idea comes into play, and it's more important now in this political
But where
shitstorm.
is the empathy generated in the show?
Well, just that humans are like, when you see a human figure, you have this, it's part of the human condition, isn't it? When you see a human form, no matter how abstract, that you can you can be empathetic with that sculpture and put yourself in the position of that form.
Yeah. Well, the kind of actually the identification we feel with the human form in art is actually it's incredibly powerful.
More powerful than the other works that these figures are looking at, I think.
Right.
But for different ways.
Mm.
But it's also like the playing God thing, isn't it? You know, when you go to a model village and you look in all the windows and you're bigger, and it's madly intriguing, just because you're bigger.
Yeah.
You have this overview, this like, it's kind of like that you put yourself in someone else's shoes is a similar kind of intrigue, power or something. A change in perspective. These are all the things that we need at the moment.
Yeah.
People being empathetic with each other. Empathetic or empathetic?
Well, emphatic and
Really?
well, no, empathetic
Oh,
and
that's
perhaps
the
and even
intellectual.
emphatic. No, but empathetic. Yeah.
Empathetic.
But I think that identification with the sculptures is what really interests me about it is that you're kind of invited to identify with the specific history of the sculpture. You're invited to inhabit the being of that sculpture, and that doesn't mean that you know what the sculpture feels like, if indeed it has feelings at all. But it somehow allows you to inhabit the narrative surrounding the sculpture and its specific history, where it's been, what things that it might have seen. So it's this kind of imaginative exercise that is productive. You know,
do
that opens up.
sculptures have feelings? It's like one of those funny pseudo-philosophical things about goldfish memories and stuff, isn't it? Do sculptures have feelings?
What qualifies you to curate an exhibition? I mean, you said earlier that everyone. Sorry, you said earlier that.
Sounds like he's about to diss me, doesn't it?
No, but you said earlier that everybody's a curator, right? Everybody curates their salad, makes a mix of their salad. Everyone curates their Spotify playlists. Everyone curates their Instagram accounts. But I think that you do have a distinction because you're an artist who is curating. But what qualifies you to be able to curate? And what do you think is productive about inviting, what's productive about the Arts Council inviting an artist to curate an exhibition rather than a curator who is, an institutionalised individual often?
First answer.
Sorry, there's probably a bundle of questions in there.
First answer is, what was the first question? Not what qualifies you, what
qualifies?
No, the first one was something else. It's about curating.
Oh, is everybody being a curator?
Oh, yeah.
Curating, this way it's being captured.
First answer is it doesn't matter if everyone's a curator or not. It just matters whether the playlist or the salad is interesting.
Right.
It doesn't make any difference.
Right.
That's all. Second one is, it's two answers. First one, I'm qualified because I was asked to do it by the powers that be, obviously. And the second answer to the second question is, it's like Mastermind. Answer D is, I'm not qualified to do it.
Right.
But then who is qualified to do it?
Well,
it's not like it's like desert island disc. If it was the last person on a desert island, then I'd be qualified to do it, but there wouldn't be anyone there to look at it, so I wouldn't have to do it.
Yeah, but then what are the kind of freedoms or permissions that you have as an artist that an institutionalised curator doesn't have?
That's interesting. That's like, if a curator had done this, they would be forcing meaning on other artists' works by pairing them. They'd be changing the meaning. All these artworks, so they had aims and objectives that artists had for them. And you can't just mess about with that, really. But, I've taken massive amount of liberties in the exhibition by making these things collide and making these other noises that these two artists didn't want these noises to be in the first place. And there's two arguments to that. One argument is that maybe I can get away with it because I'm an artist, because by definition, art is about development and research and progression and contributing to the history of art and the eloquency of visual language, and it's about moving forwards and, you know, gathering energy, and which artist who I would ask to be in the exhibition or a state of an artist would say no to those things, because they have to be the principles of art. And I don't think you would find an artist who would say that they're not their morals and their ethics. So there's an argument there that they'd have to. And if someone asked me, I would definitely say, yeah, it's just because it creates more meaning. It creates more good stuff, you know, more collisions, more noises, more difference, more interest. So there's that. And then there's, yeah, but if a curator did it, it'd be a bit like uber ego curator. Do you know what I mean?
No.
And
sorry,
artists get annoyed with that. You don't know what they mean. So there are.
No, I kind of do, but
yeah. Do you want me to explain it?
Yeah.
There's curators that exist that do that will call up and say, would you mind making a work that's red and green? The shows opens on the 25th of December. It's obviously a Christmas show. They have certain like things that they ask of you, and there are artists that will meet that brief, and they treat it as a problem-solving exercise, and it's more like, in a sense, by design, which most artists hate, but I love. I think it's good to have restrictions and problems and clients and situations. It narrows, you know, if you can do anything, it's very difficult to do something. So it's good to have a certain amount of restrictions, restraints, compromises. But a lot of artists just are not into it. They're like, you're not the artist, you're the curator. You have to deal with other stuff. We deal with that. Because, you know, I think that this is the other thing about the creative fields. There's a lot of tension between these different roles of architect and graphic designer and whatever. I mean, it doesn't make any... To me, that's not, like I said before, it's just whether it's interesting or not, it doesn't matter. And I do all those things, so it's not I'm not.
What I find really amazing about the show, among other things, is that there are works that otherwise I would be completely indifferent to if I saw them in like a city art gallery. So, you know, actually, like I've walked past works and I feel like I've seen, and there might be works that perhaps have been in the Arts Council collection that have never seen the light of day. And also, and I was thinking earlier about this idea that there might be all kinds of rescues that are taking place, or kind of like these kind of salvations that are taking place for artworks.
It's like, I'm the guy with the resuscitating.
Yeah, something like that.
It's a bit sad, isn't it?
Well, I don't know.
Is it activation more than resuscitation? Because they have the ability to be activated in the future again in many, many, many different ways. Do you know what I mean? There's other plausible situations that they can be brought to life again. But you know, that happens with art, I think. There's like, you see works, let's try and think of a really good example. Maybe I shouldn't, because then you mention names and it becomes political. There's artworks where, you know, someone makes it when in their 20s and then they drop out of the limelight. David Lamelas, do you know him? Mm-hmm. He's a good example. Didn't have any shows, no one heard of him. Reached 70, Constella Basel, loads of shows. Yeah. Like, started making work, like a work a week, amazing works. It's not him, it's just the world changes around the work. It's not anything to do with him. He was just making his work who he is. It's like he just it wasn't his moment.
Well, and these things are often
come and go, like.
these things are often framed as rediscoveries when they've just been there.
That's those
beavering away in the studio.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I think there's works in here where there's that's the great thing about the collection. There's all these works in it, and they all have the potential to have other moments of notoriety in the future, which is nice. That's what's good about art. That's what's good about human knowledge and being human. Do you know what I mean? don't mess it up.
If you've answered this, I'm just going to pick on a particular point. I mean, one way of looking at this is that the way that you've curated it is, it's the kind of liberation of the art objects. There's these kind of possibilities for new kinds of encounters between artworks from, radically disparate times and places. The other way that we could more critically look at it is that it's an expression of a kind of Tumblrization of the art world. What have you
Fly.
That it's like a kind of manifestation of Tumblr.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
The world was more Tumblr-like before Tumblr existed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just because you put it in a frame and you go like that, doesn't mean... I mean, it's interesting because I think one thing that it does that I didn't think it would do is that it talks about the speed of spectatorship a lot, and it talks about this generation of the self, the scroll culture and all that. Like, everyone's obsessed with it. Like, I mean, I think the biggest problem now with the world is that we're in this self era where everyone's individual. So people go and vote, they go out and vote, and they're like, what would be really good for me? And they don't think, what would be really good for where I live, and then I'd be living in a really nice place, and everyone would be happy, and I'll be happy. Do you know what I mean? And it's the same, it's like all that sticks.
But doesn't this link to what you're saying earlier about the idea of empathy?
It is, yeah. I mean, it's the difference
that,
between the individual and the collective.
Yeah.
And previously, if you look at the history of art, it's been about the movement of a collective. Nothing in this. Liam Gillick said this. This is a quote in case somebody says Liam Gillick said that. Liam said the thing about contemporary. Yeah, he walks around there going oi. The thing about contemporary art is nothing exists in isolation.
Yeah.
And the problem is now, it kind of does. There's artists who are making terribly crass, day-glow kind of, fingernails art, spray painty, leopard skin onesies. Trying to think of other things.
Well, I think
Apple
that
laptop on its side with a brick next to it and a broken umbrella. That kind of art that is about individual.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that like you're talking about a particular aesthetic, but it's also about a mode of like operating. There is this kind of. I mean, I heard this term the other day, the solopreneur, and it's this
That's
sort of
horrific.
Yeah. So this, but it was really interesting because it was, it was this term that was coined in 2010 to describe a certain kind of self-branding individual who is enabled through social media to spread their brand. They look for the best opportunities.
This is going off at a time. I'm going to end up being like.
Well, I'll pull you back in. You can
in
go
about 20 minutes. I'm going to be like on the floor crying again. But it's massively true. About 10 years ago, I was told off in a Dutch newspaper for saying that artists shouldn't have websites because if they had time to make a website for themselves, why wouldn't they spend that time in the studio? And that was like 10 years ago. Now look at it. It's like no one makes art. Just like promotes nothing. It's insane. I just don't understand any of it.
But then just to pull you in a bit then, just to try and link some of this stuff up, the kind of the field of looks that we might see out there in the gallery, the way that we look at a sculpture and we're forced to empathise is, to imagine something outside of ourselves is probably a good thing to do. And you talked earlier briefly, I think you mentioned Trump.
Did I?
Oh, didn't you? Or you talked about the contemporary situation, and I presumed that you meant sort of, the white lash that has occurred.
No, I was talking about HSBC moving to Birmingham. Don't know what I was talking about.
But it does seem
I was talking about everything.
But it does seem to me that there has been more generally a kind of an erosion of empathy or the ability to empathise. and that might be, you know,
What,
that
previously in history, or
well, just currently in the times that we're living
yeah.
in, that, you know, this fear of, you know, that our well-being might be compromised by the presence of others, and that empathy might be something that we need to nurture and promote, and that art might be a way of repairing empathetic relations. I mean, that sounds slightly
this is nothing to do with the show, but
what I'm saying.
I
or like,
have.
or what you're about to say.
I've got. Yeah,
all right.
I have this thing. I have terrible road rage. Really terrible. And the next car I'm going to get a smaller, less powerful car.
Right.
Because the Ferrari's just too much to handle. No.
Fuck off.
You know, like when there's some real idiot, you're just overtaking a lorry, and someone comes right up behind you, and like that, and it stresses you out. It
Yeah.
stresses me out. My heart starts going, and I'm like crying again.
Like being faced with the Arts Council collection.
And being faced with the Arts Council collection the same day was just him. No, and you pull in, and you wind down your window. We don't do that. You don't do that. And then you go like that, and you feel so good
Right.
that this total idiot goes past you. Put it back up. Turn up Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Pull out. Do you know what I mean? It's empowering empathy, and it's really good. The other thing that you could do is stay there and go, no, I'm in front of you, no, and work yourself up more. But that's just like. Anyway, should we talk about the show?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing to do with the show.
No, it is because actually, yeah, I won't labour over that anymore. But there's a couple of things I want to ask you about the colour blue. But before we get onto the colour blue, you told me a really nice story about an elderly woman who had an encounter with one of the sculptures. Maybe you can just relay that.
She was like a National Trust lady. She didn't work for the National Trust. She was one of those people that had a National Trust sticker on the back of a car near the time. Me man. And she said, it was in Longside, Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and she came over to me and she said, it's a lovely exhibition. I keep apologising to sculptures. And I was like, what do you mean? She said, well, when I walk between a sculpture and another work, I keep turning to it and going, sorry. Like she's in the way of the... And then we did this experiment this afternoon where we walked between them, and you can feel this force. It's quite weird. Yeah. You do feel like, oh, sorry, am I in your way? Yeah. Because there is definitely like some energy between these
Well, it's
things.
the power of the gaze.
She was right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's quite nice. That I didn't think that would happen. So there you go, learnt something.
Can you say a bit more about blue? I feel like I should have asked this earlier on, but we've got this we're in this blue space right now, but also, of course, the colour blue is the kind of rule that you imposed in order to make selections of works. But can you just expand on a bit more about the kind of signification of blue for you? I mean, you mentioned Eve Klein.
I made, about 15, 16 years ago, I made a load of works that were in blue rooms. And it was chroma key blue. It was.
What's the significance?
Everyone makes work about that now.
Well, chroma key green.
I feel like it's a bit late.
Well, green, the green.
Well, blue's better because there's green pigments in skin tones and there isn't blue pigments. So actually, blue is a better chroma key.
But what does chroma key do? I mean, just for the.
It's just a colour field, isn't it? So that you can take out. You can replace anything. You can put people in different concepts. It looks loads of. If you went to like the Berlin Biennial. Yeah. It's like cool now with post-internet artists to do chroma key stuff, but it's like such dated technology. But that's cool, innit? Anything that's like retro and ironic is cool. So anyway, it was just an old technology. But I think the point is that blue is the background of the European flag. Wonderful institution, and it's blue for a reason, and the yellow stars are yellow for a reason, and it's because it's the sun on the sky, which is a very optimistic thing, like IKEA, another great European institution. But I mean, essentially, when you look at the sky, when you talk about going off into the blue, you talk about the sky, you're talking about this depth of the unknown. You don't know what's there. It's not really blue, it's just very deep, you know? So it means actually everything, because you don't know what it means. You don't know how deep it is and you don't know what's out there. The blue of the sea as well is the idea of depth. Yeah, and it's kind of like hyper-modern as well, because of Yves Klein. And if you unplug your telly, this is where it all started. It probably doesn't do it now, but I unplugged my VCR with a SCART cable years ago, and the screen went blue, and I was like, so this would mean that blue is nothing. Blue is like a 0 point or null. It's like nothing at all. So it is nothing and it is everything. But it's not really everything, it's just the potential of everything, every possibility. Do you see what I mean? It's very zen and mindful. Don't like either of those words. So it's the possibility of everything. Does that make sense to you? Does that make sense or not? Does it sound like I'm making it up? I felt like it sounded like I was making it up when I said it, but I believe it.
But the chroma key, like the thing about chroma key is that if you put an object in front of a blue screen or a green screen, in post-production, in video editing, you can, potentially move that object at any time and place. So it's an oblivion of context, actually. It's a total kind of disappearance of context, which could also be seen as a possibility. But you're seeing it pessimistically, not optimistically. It's also a possibility that it can travel anywhere. Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean it negatively. I mean oblivion is a good thing. I think.
Okay.
Which is really counterintuitive.
No, oblivion is more than nothing.
I think an oblivion of context is a good thing. Yeah. And of course, there's Yves Klein Blue, but there's also, I'm thinking of Derek Jarman's Blue, and his last film, very famously, was dying of AIDS-related illness, and it was just a blue screen and a voiceover. But for him, the blue was exactly the kind of things you're talking about, like stepping out into, depth and space. And, okay. Is there anything else you want to say before we open it up to the floor? Is there anything that do you want to talk about the Arts Council?
Everyone knows what's going on in the show. We didn't actually. Do you know that the sculptures are looking at the works? Yeah. Because that would be really bad. We went through it all and we didn't say what was going. You know what I mean? Yeah. I just like the idea that usually you get the spectator and the spectacle, and here you get the spectator, which is the visitor, and then they're looking at the spectator, which is the artwork, that's looking at the artwork that's the spectacle. Just makes the equation, essentially it's another simple thing, the equation's bigger. Yeah.
But there's a theatricality about it, because everybody's looking. There's lots of
sexy, isn't it?
Lots of looks going on.
It's like being in a nightclub, loads of single people looking at each other. And what's he looking at?
Yeah.
Like that.
Well, I was thinking about Degas' time of the dawn of the beginning of modernity, really, in the modern city, and the theatre as this kind of middle class social space where there's lots of looks, and this painting, The Bar at the Folies Bergère, that's at the Courtauld, which is a social space, a bar of a barmaid in front of a mirror, and there's
the gaze again, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And so I suppose, at that time it was the theatre, now it's the nightclub. Should we take some questions from the floor? Are there any questions?
Is anyone going to be horrible before we start? Hi.
Thank you, Ryan. I had a question going back to earlier on in your conversation about the aura that surrounds artworks. And I'm guessing that means not just the figurative, human-like art, but all art. And I wonder if you could say a little bit more about what you understand that aura to be, and maybe that would go some way to explaining the question of, or the philosophical question of, do sculptures have feelings?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question. Like challenging questions. Well, the aura is different for everyone, depending on who they are, where they're from, what they know, their life experience, and how much they know about the artwork, and how much they know about the history of the artist, and how much, So it's not a set thing. I mean, I can tell you what auras. I could go around a gallery and with my divining rod. Is that what they're called? You get water, and talk about it. I guess what I think had big auras, or cowardly auras, bravado auras, showy auras. But it would just be completely subjective. To me, it's it wouldn't be. There isn't. It's not set, and you'd have different ones. I feel like if we say that sculptures don't have feelings, something bad will happen. Do you know what I mean? I want to just say, don't be stupid. It's metal, but they're a little superstitious about it. I don't want to destroy some magic.
Yeah, well, the magical thinkers would be upset,
the
probably.
The what?
The magical thinkers would be upset, or
Exactly.
The object-oriented ontologists would be upset, or...
And art's not about looking at stuff, is it? It's about believing in stuff. There was this conference at the Tate about the Future Museum that I didn't go to, but someone explained it in a meeting. Do that a lot. And it was about the Future Museum, and they said that they were going to get all the artworks together from all the museums, and they were going to put them in a massive vault. This was a futurologist, this wasn't a real person. You were going to put them in a vault in Switzerland, and they'd have this high definition, three-dimensional plasma, what's it called, holographic projector that they'd put in all the museums, in the Bilbao Guggenheim and the Tate and MoMA. So they could all share the collections, and they just, at the same time, you could go and see a masterpiece in all these places. And I was like, what? Oh, it's daft, isn't it? Doesn't make any sense, because it's not real. The whole point is, when you're an art student and you go into a gallery and you sit on the floor and sketch it, and the hair goes up on your arm, it's because it's that. That's what art is, not like what it looks like. It's what you know it to be. So it's like, it's totally like religion. It's like Shintoism. It's like having a belief and a faith in something. It's not to do with what it is, whether it's got crystals on it or whether it's like cool or there or not. Some of the best artworks that I know are just stories that people tell in bars. They're not even things. And they travel more and more people receive them just through the currency of fable making and storytelling than they do. You don't have to make a shipping container crate either. They're cheap. Don't have to insure it. Amazing.
What's your view on how would you answer your own question? I mean, the question around feelings and sculptures having feelings.
Yeah, I think, would you say that you're curating that aura?
No, different aura. You exploiting the aura to create a different hue of aura, maybe. But the original aura is still there. It's not like I'm wiping it out and replacing it. I mean, you can still see where it's from, when it's from, who it was made by. You still know the history of some of these artists and what their practice is, and you can see their trajectory in history, and so the original aura has not changed. We do have the ability to erase everything else around and look at things individually as well. If it was a matter of like destroying the aura of a thing to create an aura, I wouldn't have done the show, because that's unethical and not what I'm interested in.
I think what it demonstrates is just what the huge distance between people actually is. So that notion of empathy isn't just a simple thing that you can switch on and off, but a really densely layered experience. So an arrangement like this really, I appreciate the gesture of suggesting footpaths towards other ways of understanding things.
That's good, thanks. Sounds like a compliment. Thank God it was. Okay, someone's going to be horrible now. I know it's coming.
Any other questions? I hang on, we've got a conflict.
I was going to ask you, Ryan,
Yeah.
when we hosted an In Conversation alongside, somebody asked you what your favourite pair was, and I wondered if you had any thoughts on that, or if it had changed at all.
I can't remember what I originally said. What did I originally say? You don't remember, do you? Was it? Don't even like that one. No, my new favourite, very fickle, keep jumping about. New favourite is the Stella Stein Girl in Blue, 1951. Is it 1951, Natalie? Yeah. Yes. Natalie's the real curator. I'm just the artist that helped. She knows the stuff, really. 1951, looking at and being looked at, Yoko, 20. 2007 by Don Brown. Did it? Remember the names of an artwork. I never do that. They're probably wrong. What's interesting about the Don Brown, two things that are interesting. One, I don't know if I tell you this, you'll say, oh, the art world's so nepotistic. I'm going to tell you anyway. Don lives in the next village to us. And his kids go to in the same class as my kids. Which is nice. We do barbecues and stuff.
Is that why you selected the work?
Yeah. No. No, because it's brilliant.
Yeah.
I was a massive fan. But the other thing is, thing about nepotism in the art world is, if I was a samurai sword maker, I'd hang out with ninjas. Do you know what I mean? So it's not really nepotism, it's just revolving in the same circle. I'm obviously going to know these people. Yeah. The only ones I don't know are the dead ones that were dead before I was born. Ninja, bad analogy, wasn't it?
It was a great analogy.
And the other good thing about the Don Brown is it used to be looking at... Jesus Christ. Laziness, she never visits the... Hockney. I always forget his name.
Us two boys clinging together. Two boys clinging together.
Which is an amazing painting.
Yeah.
Because he painted it when he was at the Royal College, and then he later added a sentence written on it after he came out. And you can imagine when it was painted, politically and personally, that was quite an edgy, chancy, scary thing to do. So it's a really significant painting. But I think the Stella Stein that replaced it is actually better than it. It's, by the way, it's been taken by the bloody Tate. Because we're not important enough. So he's having a retrospective at Tate Modern. Is that right, Natalie?
Yeah,
Tate Britain. He's having a retrospective, so you can go and see it there anyway. Yeah, sorry. There was a question there in the middle, wasn't there?
You've partly answered this question, but I wanted to... You talked at the beginning about the selection process and all the Christmases rolled into one when you were looking at the collection. I was going to ask how many works that are here were you unfamiliar with until you started the selection process?
Good question. I think, before I answer the question, I think if I was familiar with over 50% of them, I was doing the wrong thing. Because the thing about art is it's education. You find in lots of startups that they do really well, better than big companies, because there's a culture of learning, because they're essentially young people that run them. And they have built into them still a culture of learning. You go to a big multinational company, and there's people there who are more mature and they feel like they don't need to learn. They feel like they know. And the point about art is art is about progression and trajectory, and it's essentially education. And education is like a sordid word, I think. But what education actually is, when you take away all the little Shit, I really can't explain this. I'm struggling. If you take away like the cliches of what you think education is, i.e. school, i.e. learning, and you embrace education, and you learn from the moment you're born till the day that you die, actually, that idea of education is the most empowering human tool. It's the most important thing. And the thing is, art is essentially, my job is, this is why I'm the luckiest guy in the world, because my job is just learning stuff. Like, how do I smoke food? I'm just going to learn about it and make a work about it. Do you know what I mean? So the answer is, I only knew about 20%. I mean, I knew the artists and I knew what they did, but I wasn't, I mean, now I know a lot more about them. But that's because there'd be no point me doing this exercise if I wasn't going to learn anything. Do you know what I mean? I'm not doing it for the money. I'm not doing it because it didn't pay anything. So I did it because I wanted to learn stuff and it was an exciting thing to do. And learning stuff, you know, it's pretty decent, isn't it?
Yeah.
Better than a Toblerone, especially with all them bits missing.
And I mean, I see quite a lot of art in my line of work, and there's quite a lot of art here that I've not seen.
It's true.
Yeah.
He knows a lot more about art than I do.
No, I don't. But you know, so it's like I'm sort of seasoned.
Yeah.
You know, but it's exciting for me to see new works. It's also
That's good. That's
yeah.
yeah. I'm not into blockbuster shows. Everyone's seen it. Boring.
Yeah.
Fancy.
We're coming up to the hour. Are there any other
Anyone
questions?
else got a question?
We can keep going. Let's see.
Say that again, sir.
Have you therefore got a niche to find out what the Arts Council's still got in its vaults? You want to make another exhibition of
I'm
that?
so shattered from it, I tell you. I also have this really weird thing where in the middle of a conversation I start talking about should we get to the pub later? Something else. And
You just start crying.
I get really distracted. In my studio, everyone actually hates me because I change the conversation every 3 seconds. And we're like, hold on, what's going on? I don't know what we're talking about.
I'm wondering, brain.
There's something up with me. I don't know what I was saying. And
which has been precipitated by the Arts Council collection?
And
Is that
because I couldn't do the same thing again. So, like, built into me is to do something different. So the thing that I did before this was I wrote this book I made a collection, wrote a book that JP edited, and the thing that I did before that was like, don't know, design trainers for Adidas. So everything that I do jumps, you see. So I can't do the same thing twice. I find myself I need a little stress ball if I'm doing the same thing twice.
What was the last show you curated, by the way? And do you do that often?
I've done about 5.
What was the last
in
one?
20 years, so not a lot. Last one was at Frieze. It was the gallery that I worked with in Tokyo, Tarinasu, and my wife's gallery, Limoncello. They had a joint booth at Frieze, and they asked me to curate it. So I just asked them for a dice each, and then just rolled the dice and picked stock randomly, and just put it up. I didn't see it. Did you see it?
I saw it. I thought it was.
Is it all right or rubbish?
Yeah. No, I thought it was really good. It looked carefree in a place that otherwise is overmanaged. You know, and it felt heterogeneous in its selection. It didn't feel like it was
But you see, that's
pandering
the
to
thing
the
about
kind of like short attention span that kind of viewing environment produces. But I mean, this is not new as a strategy. You know, we can like obviously. Maybe it's not obvious, but John Cage used the the I Ching as a way of removing his kind of agency, his own kind of authorship, and giving himself over to contingency and chaos, and so it's not a new strategy, but it is I think it is unpopular as it.
But the
heterogeneity
is unpopular, isn't it? At the moment. Like, I was in New York last month. I had a show in New York, and every show in New York is like one thing done 20 times in different sizes and colours. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's like, wow. Well, you know, you think about how complicated and amazing the world is. When you go outside, there's a bus, and then the lights change, and then this comes on, and then a dog runs past and does a poo, and then someone slips on it, and then, you know, it's like, it's quite an amazing place. You know, if you just open your eyes and stand there going, well, wow. And you go and see an art gallery, and you're like, nothing's happening at all. Like, it's so bizarre. Like, heterogeneity. I had to ask him what it meant before we started. It means a bit of everything. Is that right? It does.
I think you've been practicing it for like the last 20 years or so.
Trying to say it. No, it means a lot of stuff.
Are there any other questions before we finish? Oh, one more. Maybe if we make the... I mean, we could... I'm happy to keep going.
I'm all right. I wouldn't mind a beer, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
A bit thirsty. My wife always says I get a clicky mouth. She doesn't sit next to me at dinner sometimes.
Sorry, I'm over here.
Sorry. She has a question to ask.
Good to see me. You talk about the effect that you have in the immediate vicinity of the pieces as you're walking around. But I had a brief walk around earlier, and I'm fascinated by the psychology of space, but there's like a landscape to me, so that as you're walking around, depending on the view that you look down through the gallery and the route that you take, and also what space you're standing in, the result is, the impact is completely different. Even just now looking across here, it looks as though that is just the exhibition there, and that gives a completely different feel, if you see what I mean.
No,
is that something that you planned?
No, I was surprised at that as well. It's a really three-dimensional show. I mean, not 3D, like, ooh, 3D. I mean, like, it's the compass bearings. Is that what you mean? The way you look through, you get all these vistas. That's Natalie, the curator, the real curator. Because she studied it for ages and she knows what she's doing. She put everything in the right place. I was just like, yeah, that looks good. Isn't that true? Yeah, no, it's really hard curating. It's way harder than it looks, in a way. I feel bad now about taking the mick out of all the students at college.
Yeah.
Now I know how hard it is. Because it's like balancing things is really hard, because you don't want things to be balanced, really. Because the show's about collisions, it's about the noises that two things make when they clang together, you know. So it can't be too balanced. But it was really hard, actually. We moved quite a lot around.
Because I also noticed that some of the plinths are on the skew and the works sit, you know, they're not square on the plinths.
And then some works are on the skew and the plinths are straight.
And presumably you had to do that in order to get the artworks to line up the gaze with the artworks.
Yeah, pairing them was a challenge because of the gaze.
Yeah.
Just the eye line of things, you know. And all the plinths have to be custom made so that the gaze meets the other artwork. So
to what extent did that determine the pairings?
A lot.
Right.
It was less to do with the meaning that would be made and more to do, again, with restriction, restraint, and compromise. But that's good. That's like the John Cage thing you were just talking about. Things just happen because they have to happen. And that's how new meaning's created in a way.
Joe was saying, Joe at the back there was saying that the painting that's facing the rock drill really should have just been hung at the top of the floating wall, because it looks as you're... Sorry, this is... he's just like binning off the show, but as you come in, it's almost like...
He's saying that because he knows we spent ages trying to work it out. He's just winding us up.
That's my criticism of the...
It went up and down, that painting, a bit, I tell you.
Did it? Yeah.
But I didn't realise rock drill was so tall. And I didn't, there's things that you can't avoid, like when you walk in, rock drill's pulling a Mooney.
Yeah. There are quite a few...
Because he has to look at the bloody painting, doesn't he? You can't turn him the other way because he won't be looking at it. So the first thing you see is his bottom.
We've presented with quite a few buttocks.
Yeah, there's a lot of bottoms going on. Like the nightclub thing. I don't know. Yeah. Free associating here.
Okay. Should we? If there are any more questions? One more. If we make this the last one, I mean, we're going to be hanging. Well, Ryan, you don't need to talk to me, but Ryan will be hanging around for the rest of the evening. So, collar him.
Actually, I'm going, and JP's going to stay and answer any questions you've got. You just put me up for it.
I'm interested in the kind of, I suppose, the division between an artist that curates and a curator that curator in an institution. And I just wondered, I suppose you talked about that kind of freedom that an artist has and that you've brought to this show, you know, because I think it's a simple idea, but actually it's really brave, you know, because you're coming to it, as you said, with, you know, this 20% knowledge about some of the objects and you're creating new meanings. Do you think that artists curate better shows than institutional curators, or do you know, I just maybe that's a kind of daft kind of question, but I suppose I'm just interested in the difference between, you know, what an artist brings to curating a show and also how that reflects on your practice. You know, do the visitors coming to this show, are they going to get to know more about your practice and your interests through the pairings you've made?
From a really selfish perspective, it's massively fruitful. Rather than sitting at the kitchen table with your laptop going dunk, dunk, and trying to work something out. Because I've just had loads of ideas from doing it. I mean, it's just the learning thing's amazing. Getting to play with all these things and ideas, that's amazing. I don't know, the curator thing. It's a question from a curator. What am I meant to say? Yeah, of course artists are better than I don't know. It's different, isn't it? It depends what type of show you want. I won't be very good at doing a Francis Bacon retrospective, that's for sure. I mean, it's more like all I can do is curate a show using a recipe or a strategy that I would use to make artworks usually. So I can't curate. I can't do all the other stuff that curators have to do. That's really difficult. You know what I mean? Really, I don't know. It'd be terrible if all shows were curated by artists. But weren't all shows curated by artists before curators?
Well, earlier I was thinking about when attitudes become form show, like, you know, one of the most important conceptual art shows, which was...
Where was it, in Basel?
Harold Seaman. But then also, one of the best shows I've seen recently is Mark Leckie's Universal Addressability of Dumb Things.
Where was that?
Well, I saw it at Nottingham Contemporary. You know, and there was this kind of heterogeneous selection of works, you know, from ancient objects to, you know, the most kind of contemporary VR art. And I suppose that, like, I'm not a curator. I do know curators who work in museums, you know, and the museological categories that they have to work with.
But you have curated exhibitions, so you do have an understanding.
Yeah, but I think that because I've hung around with contemporary artists since going to art school and run art galleries, that I curate like an artist might. And I think that I take the kinds of liberties that an artist might. But I think what's really important here, you asked the question about Ryan's work in relation to his practice. I mean, what's so... You know, I mentioned at the beginning in my introduction this idea that, like, the show is biographical, but, you know, your work is characterised by this very kind of method that you've applied to here, this kind of heterogeneity. You know, that's absolutely fundamental to what you do. I think, you know, lots of people are, you know, if you're asked to characterise what your practice is, I think people have difficulty doing that. But, you know, you've very consciously avoided being able to be characterised. So I think that actually, I mean, I guess to develop and expand on your question, you know, is this your practice? Is this show your practice, or is this something that's separate to your practice?
It's my practice?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I thought that that's the case, yeah. You mentioned bravery. Who is being brave? Ryan or the Arts Council or Birmingham, you know, the hosts, or... I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Oh, God. I just think because... I suppose it's a thing that, you know, as a curator, I would... As you say, I think I would bring, you know, I'd be thinking about the relationship between the two, and I'd probably be bringing a lot of prior meaning to the pairings, which actually probably in this context isn't that helpful, because actually it's about that freedom and that, you know, you're bringing something different, aren't you? It's that kind of that flexibility and the fact that they're looking at each other as well. So I think that's the kind of brave thing, isn't it? It's kind of coming at it from a different angle where perhaps you haven't got a lot of that prior knowledge, but perhaps that's not needed, you know. And I suppose
But I think, yeah, it's interesting because usually here you have wall text, don't you? They explain the works. And I insisted that they were taken away. And I did that because if I was a curator, I'd forge a link between the two things. And when I read them texts, I'm like, shit, I never would have thought that. That's amazing that it's that. And then I think that's what it's about. But I go and look at things and I think that's amazing that the coalfield is a vase in a glass box and the Degas in a glass box. And I forge that meaning, and everyone that sees a work forges a different meaning. And I think feeding meaning inhibits openness and that you know, different stuff. So, yeah. So I think that's one. I'm not into wall text, to be honest. Explanation. I don't think things need explaining. Because you just end up, and like I said before, the world changes around art, so meaning changes, doesn't it? And I often read things about artworks from 1903 that are still being said now, and you're like Rodin, a man in inner turmoil, struggle, you know, all this kind of. And it is it, I don't know. Looks like he's taking a dump. The thinker. He could be doing other stuff, do you know what I mean? And that's important, that everyone can bring different things to things. I think good art always starts in one place with the person who's making it going, I'm interested in this, but then it ends up in a million different places. And anything that closes that down and makes it end up in one place just kind of destroys the magic of it. I think it should end up all over the place like a massive explosion, like a bottle of cherry Coke that you've shook up that just goes. Doesn't have to be cherry Coke. It can be Pepsi or anything. Fanta.
Yeah, so it's about kind of. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, in a sense, it's like. I mean, if you think about everyday objects and how we use everyday objects, you know, we use them in habitual ways, and they have a kind of functional fixity, if you like. And so, actually, what you're talking about there as an art practice is to defer those habitualized ways of behaving with
that's
objects.
Creativity, isn't it? Using an umbrella to get a Lego man from under the sofa. That's creativity.
We can
and
end
painting
it.
is as well.
Oh, that would have been a great point to end.
Yeah, the Lego man under the sofa.
Okay. All right. So, just to finish then.
Can I just say thanks to?
Can I just say thanks to Ryan Gander for taking the time to talk to us this evening, but also for you know, giving his time to making a really wonderful, surprising, complex selection from. You know, to share with us in Birmingham.
Thank you.
Can I also say happy birthday to the Arts Council?
Oh, happy birthday.
Who do a wonderful job of supporting not only contemporary visual art, but other forms of culture too. I sound like an ad man, but I'm being serious though.
Yeah, no, that's important.
I'm sorry, I'm being serious.
Because there's loads of countries you go to and they don't have a collection. And I think that's why I thought it was good to make a strategy where it was accessible, because it's like your work, you know what I mean, and my work. It doesn't, you know, there's places that exist where there isn't, that doesn't exist. It's a public collection. It's not like it's the Arts Council of England. It's not English work. It's anyone from around the world who can walk in and take ownership of it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's like so important.
Yeah, and it's being safe, and it's, you know, and it's safeguarded for the nation. And
as the meaning changes and works become pony and then become better again and slip into nothing and come back there, so it's still packed well.
So thank you, and so thanks to all of you for coming as well. So just stick around, and Ryan will be here, we'll be here, and thank you.